purposely left our previous meeting with the impression that the Jew side of things, that the circumcised side of things, that the male side of things was better and more preferred, more logical than the Gentile side of things, than the uncircumcised side of things, than the Greek side of things, than the female side of things. And I'm really enjoying this subject, and I do in my studies, and when I do talk to individuals about these things, when I, meet these things out and flesh out what they are really getting at in context, showing the division here between male and female, which is not literal. Just have to remember, this is not literal. These are genders. This doesn't say man and woman as it does in Genesis 2. This is male and female, not literal. When we think male and female, as we have seen thus far, we are to see gender. Gender. Male and female equal gender. And gender, not specifically literal, because this is gender related to the image of God. And the image of God is not a literal gender, not a physical gender, not a natural gender, but a gender of philosophy. And specifically a philosophical code for the religious mind, or for the mankind, or for the mind of the kind of man or priest to live by. And when things are going down in Genesis 1, there are two spheres created, two types of genders, male and female, or Jew and Gentile, or circumcised and uncircumcised. And both are regulated by what is called the image of God, which image is the praise of God, which praise is the philosophy of the religious law, creation via commandment for the purpose of favor, righteousness, and goodness and creation. So going through and seeing the female aspect of this, seeing then the male aspect of this, I wanted to intentionally leave the male side of things, the Jew side of things, as if it were preferable, as if it were logical. Because we saw in the previous meeting, male is, in a sense, more logical psychologically, female isn't psychologically. Psychologically, female is more logical through emotion, more logical through body. Psychologically, male is more logical through rationale. Male is more logical not through the body, but through the mind. This is how it is supposed to be traditionally in scope. Not always the case, but traditionally in scope. And the Bible here is maintaining that traditional stance. And as we've seen from the female side of things, how enticing or alluring the Greek, the Gentile, or the uncircumcised is to the male. And we saw how the male supposed to be more logical and rational in their approach. They're not using liver, for example, to do anything with what has to do with the future. They're using liver as a sense, and the organs for their sacrifices in a sense, to show a form of kindness and resolution to what is inwardly going on, that struggle between mind and body. But that's not really the case when it comes to the male, the Jew, the circumcised side of things, because in reality, both male and female are illogical. It's just that the Jew, the Hebrew, the circumcised, doesn't make their position, their illogical position, as open or as blatant as does the Gentile, the Greek, the uncircumcised. I wanted to purposely leave the atmosphere with the Bible's surface stance. The Bible's surface stance that the manner of the Jew, that the manner of the circumcised, that the manner of the Hebrew is supposed to be looked at as being more valuable than the Gentile, the Greek, or the uncircumcised. In reality, both are illogical. But again, the stance or the opinion on the surface of the Bible is that the Jew is more preferable and logical, and I wanted to leave it on that stance for this moment right now so we can see how it is not as logical as the claims are or as the assumption is made to be. Now, the Jew side of things, the Hebrew side of things, the circumcised side of things is not as blatant in what they're doing as is the Gentile, the Greek, or the uncircumcised. There is a lot of symbolism hidden within the Israelite, the Hebrew, the Jew use of the image of God. And I want to look at just one instance of that. One instance of that to look at what that really means, is signifies in a way that we can see that there is really no difference between the female side of things from the male. Looking at the Urim and the Thummim, in their ephod, the things that the high priest wore, right? The high priest wore an instrument. They wore an instrument of many colors, an instrument of colors. And these colors, Urim and Thummim, signify something in what was called an ephod, or a pocket or a holder for these things. Now, they mean to signify Urim and Thummim. We're going to see this more clearly. But in a sense, they mean revelation and truth, because that's what they were sought for. They mean revelation and truth. They mean the shining ones and perfections. Just saying what these things mean, just flat out, what they translate to mean. They mean perfection and instruction, so that we can get what this is the scope of overall due to the verses that we are going to see after hearing this. They mean light and perfection. Alone, Thummim means perfect lot. And we can get a sense that Urim should mean the opposite of that. But together, when seen together, this is what they mean. They mean light and right. They mean light and or right. These are instruments. This is a thing that is used for revelation and for manifestation, for understanding perfect lot, for understanding right lot. An example, 1 Samuel 23, 9 to 11. 1 Samuel 23, 9 to 11. And David knew that Saul secretly practiced mischief against him. And he said to Abiathar the priest, bring hither the ephod, which is containing everything, Urim and Thummim, and bring that here. Then said David, O Lord God of Israel, thy servant hath certainly heard that Saul seeketh to come to Keilah to destroy the city for my sake. Will the men of Keilah deliver me up into his hand? Will Saul come down as thy servant hath heard? O Lord God of Israel, I beseech thee, tell thy servant. And the Lord said he will come down. Now did a voice speak? David saw the ephod, which has the Urim and the Thummim within it, which is controlled or connected to the priest. And as he sought this instrument, it says the Lord said. Did the Lord speak to him? Did the Lord speak to David? And if he did, how? 1 Samuel 30, 6 through 8. 1 Samuel 30, 6 through 8. And David was greatly distressed, for the people spake of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, and every man for his sons and for his daughters. But David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. And David said to Abiathar the priest, Ahimelech's son, I pray thee, bring me hither the ephod. And Abiathar brought thither the ephod to David. And David inquired at the Lord, saying, shall I pursue after this troop? Shall I overtake them? And he answered him, pursue. For thou shalt surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. That was 1 Samuel 36 through 8. Did David's God speak to him? Because David sought an answer once again, as in 1 Samuel 23, via the priest having the ephod on him. Having the ephod on him, David sought what was called the ephod, which is known as the oracle of these people. This is the oracle of these people for an answer. And what David received was, pursue, you will overtake them and recover all that you have lost. Was David literally speaking to his God? Was David literally speaking to his God? This is what we are going to look at concerning this image that David used, and that the Hebrews or the Israelites, or that this people use as an oracle.
Embark on a voyage through the veils of prophecy with heaven's genuine and counterfeit ministry. Peer into the shadows of time as this book unveils the Earth Beast's journey. From its enigmatic origins to its astonishing expansion. See how the Earth Beast skillfully weaves a web of false religious ideology. Its aim set on seizing universal religious and political dominion. But that's not the end of the story. Heaven's genuine and counterfeit ministry exposes prophecy's veiled truths, empowering you to discern authenticity from artifice. In addition to learning about the character of the Earth Beast, find out how this book is your companion, being a shield against spiritual manipulation. Unearth the enigma, challenge the illusion, and discover the Earth Beast and its quest for dominance. The decision rests with you. Are you prepared to unravel the truth?
So we have a lot to read. Among modern translators, Luther clings most faithfully to the tradition suggested by the Greek meaning, which chimes in well with the interpretation of Philo, who thought that an indication of an affirmative answer, the gems in the breastplate would light up. The opinion that light and right were represented in the Urim and Thummim has found considerable support in the fact that the Egyptian high priests, when appearing in court to sit in judgment, wore breastplates with the symbol of justice and truth. No, David did not receive a literal answer from a literal voice from a literal deity. That did not happen. What actually happened is that David inquired at the oracles that the high priest was wearing, the oracles of the ephod, the Urim and the Thummim. He was inquiring at those oracles, and depending on how those oracles lit up, he knew yes, go, or he knew no, don't. When David saw those things light up, he knew yes, go. He knew no, don't go. It wasn't a literal voice. It was some sort of mysticism here, which traces back to the Egyptian priesthood that David and his host were using to decide whether to move forward or not. If we consider that Ma, the goddess of truth with prefixed articles, reads Tema, we can find a similarity of sound between Thummim and Tema, and also between Urim and Ra. The latter word Ra recalls Urim still more when we compare it to the Coptic word Eroioni, which means illumination and may have had the meaning of revelation. The Hebrew word Urim, if it is originally a Hebrew word, can be derived directly from or, meaning light, and should in that case be pronounced Orim, not as the text reads Urim. The Greek translations still indicate this meaning. The meaning of Thummim is not easily determined, for we cannot doubt that the Greek translation truth is more an interpretation than a literal version, considering the fact that the words Urim and Thummim are two plural terms and that they denote a contrast, that they were lots and must have been two sets of objects opposed the one to the other. We ought to find this contrast in the words themselves, and we see a possible solution in the proposition to explain Thummim as the symbols denoting innocence and Urim, those denoting guilt or to curse. So when those lights lit up, you knew one, innocence, you knew two, curse. Innocence translating to mean you are just in what you are doing. Curse meaning you are unjust in what you are doing. Depending on how these lights lit up, that was the answer you received. You didn't hear a voice from a literal deity. There was no deity talking to David, as the Bible would make it seem, because that's just the impression the authors of the scriptures want to give off, and especially to individuals that are reading these things, Gentiles, that don't know this. In reality, they use some sort of divination is what this is. They use some sort of divination to where their lights would mysteriously light up and reveal yes, pursue, or no, don't pursue. The lights would light up to reveal yes, your decision is innocent, no, your decision is cursed. So when we're reading about the Hebrew side of things, the Jew side of things, the circumcised side of things, and the Bible is making it appear more logical, more intelligent, because the Bible is not citing exactly point by point what's going on here. And it won't, because on the surface, the opinion is supposed to be the male, the Jew, has a practice better than the female or the Gentile. That's the impression the authors of the Bible want to give on the surface. And on the surface, you will not find any pagantry associated to what the Jews, to what the Hebrews, to what the circumcised is doing. It is to remain hidden because the narrative is that it is right. Everything therein is right because their deity is right. But in reality, they're doing no different than the Gentile, than the Greek, than the uncircumcised. In reality, their practice is just as illogical as the ones that they say are illogical and are without culture. In our previous meeting, I reviewed the way that the Israelites or the Hebrews or the circumcised viewed their burnt offerings and sacrifices. They viewed their organs as representing philosophical concepts and as concepts related to what was internal within the human being. So when you're sacrificing the internal organ of an animal, in turn, you're sacrificing that internal struggle, that internal conflict, strife within yourself, and you're burning it. You're burning what is inside of you as representing that conflict, as representing that struggle, and as representing as you doing what you know you must now do to never do that again. Now that's on the surface, and that's very admirable. But again, I have a reading here, and the opinion within this reading puts that into perspective, because I was trying and hopefully gave the impression that this is the logical, the Jew, the circumcised, the male side is the logical. And when you look at it philosophically, there's a philosophical context to structure morality in a sense of keeping the individual at a heightened awareness of themselves, and that is positive. But looking at the epistle of Matthias to Diognetus, chapter 3. In the next place, I imagine that you are chiefly anxious to hear about their not practicing their religion in the same way as the Jews. The Jews then, so far as they abstain from the mode of worship described above, do well in claiming to give reference to one God of the universe and to regard him as master. But so far as they offer him this worship in methods similar to those already mentioned, they are altogether at fault. For whereas the Greeks, by offering these things to senseless and deaf images, make an exhibition of stupidity, the Jews, considering that they are presenting them to God as if he were in need of them, should in all reason count it folly and not religious worship. For he that made the heavens and the earth and all things that are therein, and furnishes us all with what we need, cannot himself need any of these things which he himself supplies to them that imagine they are giving them to him. But those who think to perform sacrifices to him with blood and fat and whole burnt offerings, and to honor him with such honors, seem to me in no way different from those who show the same respect toward deaf images. For the one class thinks fit to make offerings to things unable to participate in the honor, the other class to one who is in need of nothing. And so I'm highlighting this because, as admirable as it is to find philosophy in the sacrificing of animals and to pinpoint organs specifically representing thoughts and feelings and conflict and concepts that one can sacrifice and offer, as opposed to using them for pagantry, as we saw in the previous meeting the king of Babylon did, well, that's admirable. That's highly favorable, and that should be. But again, the Israelite, the Jew, the circumcised, they are flipping the coin here. They are hiding the illogical practice of offerings and sacrifices. They are highlighting and they are hiding the illogical practice of offerings and sacrifices of animals and of their organs, whether it is meat or meatless. They are hiding the fact that it is a pagan practice, and it is highly illogical to do so, especially to an invisible deity, especially to an idea that is a deity. It is absolutely illogical, makes no sense that the one that created these things should want the smell of their flesh burning for a sign of any kind of particular offering of penance or anything like this. Whether it is at that time burnt offerings and sacrifices, or whether it is at this time eating a wafer of body and drinking something of blood, it is all senseless to an invisible deity. And the author here is just in his point, because if you're going to do anything like this, you have to come up in your awareness, in your level of consciousness devotionally, to understand how to match whatever an invisible deity would need, because this isn't cutting it. And it is just as illogical, as the author says, as the Gentile practice, as the Greek practice.
A genuine relationship with the Bible can be difficult. Sometimes we don't know where to begin. Sometimes we don't know how to trust our experience. Sometimes we may be afraid to get too close to our Creator. Perfecting and reforming personal religion will be your guide. This book will make sure your spiritual journey is fulfilling. Don't miss this opportunity to elevate your devotional practice. Embrace the wisdom within its pages and embark on a journey of self-discovery. Grab your copy now and take the first step towards a more fulfilling and enlightened life.
I wanted to leave our previous meeting with the impression that the Jew side of things, that the circumcised side of things, that the male side of things is logical. And that the other side of things, the Gentile side of things, the uncircumcised, the Greek, the female, is illogical. I wanted to leave that impression, specifically just to show this. That whether it is male or whether it is female, it is illogical. The Jew, the circumcised, appearing logical on the surface, and it is admirable to take and to see the organs of animals, to represent concepts, and to really dig into the struggle between the human and what is within them, to then offer that symbolized through the organs and the flesh of an animal, or through the bread of some sort, sprinkled with some sort of something. That's admirable. But that really, it doesn't really go any higher than that, because that really can't do anything, as the argument in Hebrews 10:1 and 2 goes. If these things were actually good, if these things actually did something, there would be no conscience of sin afterwards. This is an illogical practice. Despite how it is flipped, despite how philosophical it may appear, it is an illogical practice, and it is no different than the Gentile. Only difference is there's a moral compass attached to it. There is a moral compass attached to it for the individual doing it and for the priest offering. For both priest and lay participating in this, there is something moral about it. There is something philosophical about it. There is something edifying about it. Nevertheless, it is done through a pagan practice. It is done through an illogical practice, as is similar to the Gentile, to the Greek, to the uncircumcised. So the Bible's opinion on the surface is that the Jew, the circumcised, is favorable, is logical, but in reality, it's not. It is not. Whether it is the Israelite practice, the theory of burnt offerings as a penance and clarifying the conscience, or whether it is the Christian side of things or the present Abrahamic religion side of things, where it is whether still of blood or whether it is of bloodless, it is all illogical. All illogical. Cain offered a bloodless offering. Was it accepted? No. Abel offered a blood offering. Sure, that was accepted, but that acceptance is attributed to an illogical practice in an illogical way back to an image that they are supposed to maintain. It is the image of God that is regulating both male and both female. It is the image of God both male and female have to figure out for themselves. Despite how logical or illogical, despite how rational or irrational, both male, both female, both genders using the image of God, both genders or both species of religious practices, circumcised and uncircumcised, they have to make use of the image of God because that's their blueprint. That's their DNA. They can't go in any direction. They can't go in any other direction, They can't go in any other direction. And the circumcised side of things is most likely seen as more logical than the uncircumcised side of things, because the circumcised side of things likes to bring everything back down to a philosophical concept and to the construct of the feeling within the individual. Again, admirable. But it cannot be forgotten that the image of God here is in use. That the code of doing by commandment for the sake of receiving righteousness, goodness, and favor, that has to be at use for both species of religious practices, circumcised and uncircumcised. And so I wanted to just highlight this part of the circumcised, because we cannot maintain the idea or the surface idea, because not even the Bible maintains the surface idea that the circumcised practice is more logical and more rational than the uncircumcised practice. Both in reality are illogical, and we can understand that both are illogical, not just due to the illustration of the crucifixion and what that figuratively means, but due to the consistent narrative within the scriptures, that the living God searches what is within, that brokenness of spirit and of heart is a qualifying offering in order to receive the blessing of the living God.